taking you through today some key top tips to help you pass your F2 exam. If you've never been to one of my webinars before, my name is James. I try to base them as to if I wanted to treat myself to the F2 exam, how would I go about it? What are the key areas that I'd be wanting to make sure I'm really on top of? And so that it helps you on your CIMA journey all the way to qualification. Myself, CIMA, and the Learn Signal team do a variety of different webinars, so feel free to keep in touch. You can do that via Instagram, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and so that you don't miss out on any further opportunities to share insights from other top tutors like myself, again, just to help you over the line, and in particular for today, all about the F2 exam, and taking through the different sort of levels and aspects that you need to be aware of. As Kira kindly said, you're going to have access to all the slides, but it's a case of if you want to take down some notes, screenshot, whatever it may be, I'm just going to get straight into it in terms of, first of all, for a calculations point of view for your F2 exam. And again, it's just to sort of set that expectation. And so, I've been there for exams the night before, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my word, I can't sleep. What could be coming up on this? Well, in terms of calculations, and if you're struggling as to maybe what the expectation is for a cost of debt or a cost of equity calculation, have a look after this webinar back at some past papers or a mock test just to see how it's been tested in the past and the level of difficulty. But that's what I would have down in terms of your notes from today as a sort of standout, that you need to be aware of the capital structure elements, the level of debt, the level of equity. Classic case examples for anyone who's done some practice questions before. In terms of sort of debt, you get the sort of loans on there. And in terms of cost of equity, 9 times out of 10 is going to be share capital and premium. And touching on your F2 exam now in a bit more detail as to what kind of style of requirements, question should you expect on the exam day, and then no matter which provider you're actually using, or maybe you're self-studying, the sort of level of questions that you could be tested on. And as you can see on the right-hand side there, starting at the bottom, areas 1 to 2, remember and understand. That is your basic knowledge, which we'll come on to in the different syllabus areas. There are going to be a few sort of low-hanging fruits where it's going to be a case of you either know it or you don't know it on there, really. And those will be the ones in the exam that you should be able to fly by really quickly. But again, to set that expectation, there are going to be very few of those style questions. The real one for you to get down now in your notes is the application, demonstrating your knowledge, the concepts, the techniques. This is where this exam is all about giving you the skills to then take you on to the next level when you go on to your case studies on there, for example, which I'm sure you're all delightfully looking forward to, especially if you've been speaking to some of your colleagues on there going, oh my word, case study. Oh, I wish I could do the F2 exam on there. But coming on to more seriously, areas 4 and 5 at the top, there's going to be a few different areas and possibilities of getting a few more slightly more tricky, complicated areas of analysis and evaluation. But again, this is where a well-drilled student who's had a real good go at past paper questions for this exam should actually have, as a sort of expectation going into this exam, that there are going to be a couple of questions that get thrown at you where you go, hang on a second, James, that is really tricky, or that's a bit of a dubious answer. Ooh, not sure about that, the level of detail. And I would actually expect it to come up. And that is a real key tip for you to get down so it doesn't throw you off, because there are going to be marks that are a lot more achievable and for you to actually obtain in your exam. Now, one of the things for your revision and note taking and breaking up the actual exam, what I'd be doing if I was in your position, is the content areas on the screen, which is broken up into 5 areas: financing capital projects, financial reporting standards, oh gosh, Friday night reading there, group accounts, integrated reporting, and working with financial statements. You may be a sort of pen and paper kind of person like I am, or Excel, maybe you've got an iPad. I would have 5 different folders for those different content areas. And what I used to do as a student was, when I was going through questions and I got them wrong, which you should be getting them wrong because that's testing your knowledge on there. No one's going to get everything spot on right in their revision. Is if you got it wrong, say it was group accounts, pop the question in the group accounts folder and then make a few notes in your own words as to why did you get it wrong and how can you learn for next time, because that will mean a day or two before the exam you'll have 5 different folders full of aspects that you didn't know that you can read really, really quickly, and then have a real nice reflection on those sort of areas. Go, yes, I won't make that mistake again, because I'm not a betting man, but this is one of the key things, that there'll be something when it comes to those folders that will be on your exam. And last but not least, the weightings on the side. Just so you're aware, the financial statements, group accounts, and financial reporting standards have the highest weighting on here, but that is not obviously to overlook the integrated reporting and financing capital projects. But now, I mean, in terms of Kira and myself and the CIMA and Learn Signal team, we love for you guys to get involved in the webinars, and so you get familiar with the platform. Maybe it's the first webinar you've been to. This is where we have the little box on the side, which we want you to use now, just to put in the month when you're going to be doing your F2 exam. Now, it's most likely we've probably got a lot of students here today, maybe doing it at the end of May, start of June on there. But we also have students, so I can tailor it for you guys who have tuned in live. Maybe you're doing it later on into the year. You might fancy a summer to actually go away and enjoy yourself on there. But use the chat box on the side. Just put in the month when you're going to be doing your F2 exam, and it showcases to myself and Kira what kind of students we got here as well. Maybe if you're resetting, that could be another thing as well. Doesn't matter. But Kira, how are we looking? When are the majority of the students who are joining us today going to be doing their F2 exam?
The majority of people are doing it at the start of June or the end of May, actually. Yeah, so
Just
we've got everybody seems to be doing it in the next 2 months.
Oh, rock and roll. That helps me to tailor it from there. Thank you very much, Kira, for that. I mean, it must be, I'm going to do my F2 exam and then roll on a nice little holiday. I think on that is probably the approach for it. But speaking of approaches, coming to your F2 exam approach itself, because my life is so entertaining and I chat to tutors, markers, examiners on there, I do actually have friends, it's okay. But coming away from that, I always ask them, James, why do students fail the F2 exam on there? Just give me the nuts and bolts on that. And one of the main areas is lots of students just go from question number 1 to number 2 to number 3 to number 4 and just try and do them all individually, even if they're getting a bit stuck. And this is a technique I would highly recommend that you take away and implement after today's webinar, is that you can flag questions, as I'm sure you're aware, having a look at the F2 exam if you've done a mock yourself. And the examiners showcase to us that students who flag the questions, go to the ones that they know in the first 20 minutes, half an hour of the exam, and get marks under their belt. In other words, giving yourself a bit of momentum and confidence when it comes to your F2 exam to say, hang on, I'm 20 minutes in here. I've gone through 10, 15 questions. I'm feeling on top of it. I've got some positive energy, momentum on here. And I flagged some questions, wasn't quite sure, but I'm going to come back to those later when I've got a bit more focus. Versus 10, 15 minutes in, struggling on question 3 or 4, not really sure where we're going. And then this is where students don't answer all of the questions or they don't leave enough time to analyze them properly. So take into account that approach maybe when you're doing a few mock papers and see how you get on. That would be what I'd be looking for on there. Straight away, as he said, go for those short and sweet, easy questions, knowledge application, things that you've probably seen in mock papers that you go, hang on a second, that seems pretty similar. I know my stuff on this. Right, 30 seconds, quickly read, know my answer, move on to the next one. Then it's those sort of longerish questions where you've got to think about it in a bit more detail. You've got a rough idea and you've narrowed it down to about 2 answers. Then go for those in your sort of second round approach. And then third and finally, as I said, this is so key for your expectation coming to your F2 exam, so that there will be some not very comfortable questions, but you want to be in a position that you answer all of the questions so that it gives you the best possible chance. And maybe taking some time out of those first two areas that we talked about, rounds 1 and 2, as you can see on the screen, to allocate a bit more time for the third round, answering all the questions and giving it your best go. But please expect there to be some tricky areas on your exam on there. You go, was that just a paragraph in the text? Was it just a line on one of the slides that I watched on a recording? And I've touched on earlier as to key syllabus areas where you go, they are important, the breakdown of the 5 areas. Well, in terms of the questions, and so that you see the familiarity in these when it comes to the mocks, these are the important words to look out for and to really put emphasis on in your exam when you're reading through the requirements. So we have not, always, never, most, least, best, and worst. And the key thing here, obviously, you can't um, announce it in the exam. You have to think about it in your mind. But when you see those words and you're reading the requirement carefully, really put emphasis, highlight it when you're going through the requirement, as that will help direct you to the most suitable answer on there for it. So an example just to look on here from a question that relates to the application of that is, when evaluating a new project, it is most suitable to use WACC as the discount rate when, and in this case, we had the answer of C, the capital structure remains constant on there. And this is where you've got to have that word most in your mind, that when you're reading through the 4 different options on there, you go, right, most suitable. Is this most suitable? And really put emphasis on it and pick up on this when you're going through the mock papers in your revision. And a few different areas as to reading, just the general sort of approach as I'm sure you've had on previous exams. You don't need me to tell you as to reading the question carefully, putting emphasis on the key words, going through the options and trying to work out. There'll be sort of red herrings on there, which simply just means it can't possibly be right. It's there to throw me off. With the last sort of thing being selecting the most appropriate option. And there will probably be a couple of questions on this exam where you go, oh, it could be this, it could be that. There's a bit of ambiguity as to what it could be and how you interpret it. Put it to the back of your mind, flag it if you need to, and move on to the next question on there. And again, just to reiterate on there, reading all the options, highlighting on that key term. Sometimes they actually have it in capitals as well, which helps for you to actually put emphasis on it. And then it's only going to come with practice, as you can see from the tips from the Learn Signal team on the side there, ruling out the options that just simply are completely tosh. They are incorrect. They've got nothing on there that it could possibly be that answer. Anything that's conflicting or agreeing with the answer. And some of them as well, you have to maybe select 2 options on there. Just read the question on there and make sure you answer it correctly as well. It goes without saying, just in case this is someone who's maybe planning on doing this exam in the future, give or take, it's about 90 seconds per question on there. That's where the key thing is. Don't waste time if you're unsure of it. Flag the question, move on. And a question we always get in some of the webinars is there negative marking? And what that means is, am I going to be punished if I get it wrong in one area of the exam? And it's just to highlight today, there is no negative marking. Attempt all the questions, read it through carefully, and try your best to gain as many marks as possible on there. So what we'd give and go through for you today is the different content areas, A, B, C, D, and E. And again, I've popped them on the slide on here so you can see them again. But we'll go through them now out of the 60 questions, a little example as to what you can expect. Maybe you're going to be getting onto your revision and mock papers on there. I would say if your exam is at the end of May, start of June, middle of May, you have to be getting onto mock papers on there so that you know your line in the sand. And that's where you can start to go through the different content areas to work out what are the likely areas to be tested. And this is where for content area A, again, if you want to note it down, take a screenshot, photo, I don't mind. These are the breakdown of different areas that could come up in financing capital projects. In other words, how are we going to get the money to pay for whatever we're going to be doing in terms of this project? So you've got that debt and equity finance we talked about at the start in terms of the calculations. long-term funds, cost of equity, cost of debt, and the weighted average cost of capital on there. So just briefly looking at a sort of general topic area. So you've got the theoretical exercise right price on there, also known as TERP. We have the little formula at the bottom on there for it, and a small little definition as to when there is a rights issue, existing shareholders have the right to first refusal on new shares. Usually these shares are offered at a discount, which will cause a dilution of the share price. So this is where, are they going to exercise their rights to take up these shares, yes or no? Again, just a sort of little topic area that would come up potentially in area A. And this is where, in terms of a calculation, sort of one that you've got to be thinking on your toes as to what would be the theoretical exercise rights share price for the shares of Mike PLC. We're given how many shares we've currently got, a current market price on there. It offers a rights issue of 1 for every 3 shares held at a price at $4 each. And you can see the calculations at the bottom, taking that we've got the 3 shares held at a price of $4. We've got the multiple of $5 on there, the current market price. So therefore, our theoretical exercise rights share price would be $4.75. So again, a classic four different answers on there. We'd have to calculate it through, and just a sort of practice question for content area A. Content area B now for financial reporting standards. These are the key areas that the CIMA marking team break down for the F2 exam. Revenue, leases, provisions, I'm sure all exciting stuff for you on here. Financial instruments, both financial and liabilities. Intangible assets on there, such as goodwill. Income taxes on there as well, with changes in foreign currency rates. Finally, with any relevant financial reporting standards for group accounts. Again, these should be how you should be maybe breaking up your notes if you would have a specific folder for content area B. And a sort of classic area sort of style of question they love to test on there is all about, this case, we've got IS 37, contingent assets and liabilities. And this is all about what is the probability? What is the likelihood? And I quite like the breakdown on here as to, we've got the likelihood on the left-hand side. So remove, is it possible? Is it very certain on there? The sort of probability that you should have in your mind in terms of probable, possible, remove on there, or virtually certain. We've then got the different accounting treatments. So accounting treatments for liabilities, accounting treatments for assets. And these are the sort of questions that, for another sort of exam technique to help you out, is you've got to have trigger terms in your head as to when you see contingent, you've got to think, what is the likelihood? What is the probability? And if it's highly probable or virtually certain on there for liabilities, we've got to actually recognize it. But the difference there being in terms of if it's an asset that's pretty probable, then we only disclose. But again, it's going to come with practice, more questions for you to go through and seeing it as an example on there. Which you can see, we just touched on there for contingent assets, show contingent assets should be recognized in the financial statements when their probability occurrence is, and we just touched on it, that if it was sort of, oh, it's probable on there, but in terms of being recognized, it actually has to be certain as a result. So that's where you have to differentiate, and you could be given 4 different options like you can see on the screen. Moving on to content area C, again, giving you a nice little breakdown of the 25% weighting of this content area. I mean, it does what it says on the tin. For anyone who works in practice or in industry, statement of financial position, you've got your balance sheet on there, you've got your profit and loss, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flows, the bread and butter of group accounts that in order to progress onto your next exam, you have to know those. They are just imperative or you're really going to struggle. Please expect that to come up on your exam. With lastly at the bottom, transactions between related parties. So you could have some subsidiaries, sister companies, associates, and last but not least, earnings per share. So let's just have a look at an area that could come up, and we've got an area of goodwill on here, fair value approach. So this would be in the actual calculation because it's going to be included within the statement of financial position. And you've got to say basically for the goodwill calculation, how much did the parent invest in the subsidiary, and what did they actually obtain? What did they buy from that subsidiary? How much was it worth? So you've got to say there we've got the parent's investment in the subsidiary plus any NCI on there for the value at acquisition, non-controlling interest, and then less what we actually had in terms of the subsidiary, what were their fair value net assets at the date of acquisition. And this is where we're going to get our goodwill figure, which will be then placed in the statement of financial position. But again, I'm going to just have it on the screen. We've got the workings at the bottom. But again, we'll just go, if this came up as your question in the exam, first of all, I know there's 3 sentences on there and there's lots of figures and lots of bits of dates and everything. Step 1, go straight to the requirement. What is the cost of investment that will be used in the goodwill calculation in the consolidated statements of GHI? So this is the company on there. So we've got 4 figures that we've got as answers. They're all in the 2 million ballpark range. That's quite important because you sometimes get answers which you go, hang on a second, goodwill in a company that has all these large figures, it's not going to be sort of 500,000 on there. I mean, we'd obviously have to check it through on the workings, but some of them, you sometimes get a question that's a complete outlier. We've got the workings at the bottom in terms of deferred cash. We had some professional fees that cannot be capitalized on there as part of the cost of investment. They are not capital expenditure, they are going to be revenue expenditure, and therefore the total cost of the investment has to be adjusted as a result. And that's where we come to actually what was the cost of investment that would be used in the goodwill calculation. In this case was $2.780 million on there. Content area D, we have integrated reporting. These are the 4 areas broken down. So we've got the role of the International Integrated Reporting Council, integrated thinking, internationally integrated reporting framework, and the measurement and disclosure of any issues. Only 10% weighting, 6 questions, but again, an area that is going to be more and more prominent the further you progress through your CIMA studies. And if I was you, these are the different 6 areas to get down in your integrated reporting notes: human capital, financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, social and relationship, and finally, natural capital on there for it. But it's just breaking it down into the different areas of what a question could come up. So a little practice question, just so that you can see a little example that was used from a previous past paper question. Which of the following types of capital can be categorized as intellectual capital on there? And this is where, if you're a company, you might have the rights in terms of a patent, and these are organizational, knowledge-based intangibles that we have the rights to that patent. We could maybe sell the rights to the patent, but they are intellectual capital. We've built them up, we've had the patent accepted, and we own the full rights to that intellectual capital. We can sell it, we can use it ourselves, and just think about it practically as a result on there to help you out. And last but not least, working with financial statements now. 25% weighting, 15 questions, ratios, recommended actions, data limitations, and limitations of ratio analysis. This is an area which students tend to find that they pick up a lot of marks on, so making sure you just don't make any silly mistakes. And especially when you see sort of areas and questions like users of the financial statements, they love to test internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. So you've got a list of examples on here: the government, customers, employees. These have come up in previous past papers. And therefore, a sort of practice style question, again, going straight to that requirement: which of the following might explain the increase? So ABC's current ratio was 1.4 to 1 in 2009 compared to 1.2 in 2008. So in other words, the current ratio has gone up. It has £1.40 in current assets to £1 in current liabilities. And you can see on the answer here, we've got ABC made a unusually large scale, unusually large sale. There we go, that tongue twister there, just before the year end, as you can see. So that would mean the sale's gone through a sort of injection of cash right at the end, and there could have a cut-off would have been a sort of area and key term that I would have as to the reason why that may have happened for it. But again, go through all the different options that you can see and then picking out the most logical answer. And this is where we now come on to the 5 different content areas. This is to help someone who's watching this or tuning in live, and you guys are going to now go back to that question box on the side and just put in there which of the different content areas, all we need is a little letter, A, B, C, D, and E. Which one do you think is the most trickiest or the most difficult for it? So just give you a second on there as to just identifying which content area do you find the most difficult. Kira, I'm not running away. Someone's trimming a hedge outside with that. I'm just going to close the window whilst the guys put their answer in the chat box. I'm back. They pick the moments to trim the hedge outside.
So there's quite a big mix actually. At least one person has suggested every area, but mostly we're seeing C down.
Yeah, C is very tricky on that, especially with the weighting of 25%. The other one, just to note down, has got to be content area B, the financial reporting standards. That some of those are very, very tricky, but it comes down to maybe your experience, where you're working. I would definitely not overlook that, nor any content area, because they can test absolutely anything in this examination. Thanks very much for that, Kira, as well. I'm just conscious of time, so we can get on to some questions for you guys. And today's session is not just about key topic areas, the exam itself. It's what can you take away from today's session and go, I can put that into practice. James discussed it as a topic area, all about your exam preparation, your study technique. What were the mistakes that I made? I failed exams before. I talk about it on my YouTube channel and I just go, yeah, it happened. It's not a great, it wasn't a great day going into the office. What can I help students out with now so that they can have those little marginal gains to pick up on some more marks? Tip number 1, if you're not doing this already, plan your study time, block it out in your calendar, say to yourself, I'm really sorry, this is a non-negotiable, I have to get it done, because what gets actually planned on there and actually timed gets measured, and you will see better results, because otherwise time can just slip away. You can end up watching Netflix or something on those lines, and it actually helps you to study smarter and not harder in terms of allocating time for you to go running, go to the gym, see your friends, all those sort of things. And maybe you've got children who, when you're watching this, or maybe you're working full time like I used to do. I had to do evening classes, I had to do work before work, study before work, weekends as well. Setting those sort of targets to when you want to have things done by and planning out your days. That we used to have client meetings quite a lot, and then you had to prepare tax returns. And some days I used to have to hold my hands up and say, I literally have only got time for about an hour, maybe max on there, but it was built into 3 20-minute sessions. But those little 20-minute sessions make such a difference and keep the momentum going on your journey to actually passing your exam. So block out that study time, work out when you actually revise best as well. I always work best right the way in the morning, sort of 9 till 1, get all my stuff done in those times, and then work on the sort of more mundane stuff in the afternoon. Setting targets and deadlines. A key target for anyone here today, 3 weeks before your exam, I'd be saying you've got to have done a mock paper so that you're going to be getting on target as to where are your sort of gaps on there, and you've got time to then work on how to improve. And we've also got down there, your study environment makes such a difference. I used to study in our boardroom, because when we went in there, it was either just to see clients or to actually study, because no one was in there. I used to go to coffee shops, public libraries. Find a place either in your home or where you can go to that when you go there, you study. That is where your brain will click into it and you will see massive improvements. Other final things as to really clicking yourself into gear and getting yourself up for this exam is booking it in the first place. We might actually have some students here who've gone, oh, I'll do it another time. I just ran the Boston Marathon, that's UK, last weekend, and I booked that 6 months ago. So it was already in my mind to say, come on, James, you've got to get the training miles in, otherwise you're going to crash on mile 20, something on those lines. Practice questions, mock tests, revising the core units that you're struggling or weak in, even if it's just a 20-minute session, half an hour, those sessions add up and accumulate and are really, really important to getting you over the line. And the mock tests, I know you can get into the habit of maybe just saying, oh, you know what, I'll do 15 questions this morning, then 15 at lunchtime, then 15 in the evening. If you can do the mock test on a Saturday, Sunday, when you've got the allocated times, you can sit down, treat it like the real thing. It's going to be far more beneficial than doing it bit by bit on there to really reenact what it's going to be like on the exam day. And last but not least, revising those core areas, whichever area of the syllabus it is, you're all going to have 1 week area, and you have to target that week area. You can't take the easy route, because that is where it's going to pay so many dividends to you in the exam, that those hard areas are going to come up. And if you avoid them, then you might as well just wave the white flag, I'm afraid. It's a case of really target those in your revision, go through them, note it down, put them in folders, link it to the syllabus, like we said, and you will definitely see an improvement on there. In terms of Learn Signal, which I probably should have mentioned at the start, there'll be some people here who have maybe never heard of Learn Signal. And I've reiterated study plans, exam practice, mock papers on there. They even have a boot camp, which is fantastic, and I'm part of the tutor team for it, where basically every day on the run up to your exam, there is some form of question practice or 24-hour student support that helps you keep on track. And it's the motivation and the actual momentum that you get. Students are held accountable for it, and it speaks for the results. You can check it out on their website. But what the team have done here is, if you've still got your phone with you, you can scan that QR code on there. It's going to take you to all of the CIMA mock resources that are available on the Learn Signal website. In a nutshell, if a student comes to me, I say, what's the best way and your best chance of passing an exam? As many mock papers as you can do, to time. If you can, get them marked by a tutor to give you specific feedback. And that is something that the Learn Signal team can help out with. And we'll also have the support email at the end on there, as it helps students get over the line. I've been there, done that, as to getting part qualified, maybe you're moving jobs on there, all these sort of things. And you can see from how happy Ken is on here, actually going through the mocks really helped him to actually pass his exams and to get him over the line to become qualified. So you can do your own research on it. I'm going to put the email at the bottom on here, where if you want some more information on the F2 exam, just drop them an email at the bottom. But as ever, it's always just a massive thank you to the Learn Signal CIMA team